Hi friends, in this video I'm going to give you some tips to improve your Spanish fast. Hi, my name is Dan Burgess, I'm the Managing Director at Burgess Institute. We've taught over 32,000 students over the years. So usually if you start learning Spanish from scratch, or if you studied back then in high school but you forgot everything, usually the first thing that you'll do when you decide to learn Spanish is to download an app, most likely Duolingo. I know Duolingo is getting a lot of hate online these days because of the AI thing. Whatever, I think it's a great app, it's really well done, it has gamification, it makes learning fun, and the incentives are aligned to an extent. The app is always trying to get you to stay in it, but it's not like you are doom scrolling on TikTok, you're actually learning something, so it's kind of a win-win. But here's the thing, learning a second language as an adult is hard. You need to memorize a lot of vocabulary, and if the language is not related to your native language, you'll need to memorize a lot of grammar rules. If you speak Portuguese and you are learning Spanish, it will be way easier. You'll still have to memorize a lot of vocabulary, but at least the grammar is very similar. But if your first language is English and you are learning Spanish, you'll have to memorize so many verb conjugations. You'll need to understand the subjunctive. You'll need to understand the object pronouns, the lo, la, le, and the grammatical cases, the accusative, the dative, etc. And that is not easy. So while Duolingo is great and it's fun, learning Spanish should feel hard at some point. Your brain should be trying to preserve energy while you try to push through it and keep learning and keep studying. Kind of like a workout at the gym. You should be tired after a study session. You might also think like, oh, I'm going to consume a lot of content. I'm going to watch all these YouTube videos, all these comprehensible input videos. They are very popular these days. I'm going to watch all the shows on Netflix. I'm going to master my Spanish because I'm going to log in so many hours of passive consumption. That is also great. Comprehensible input is a great tool, amazing. But again, we're making it feel too fun and too easy. While doing those things is amazing, we should be using apps, we should be watching content. It's really important to sit down at some point and do some active memorization and study the grammar. So some tips for memorization, both for vocabulary and for grammar rules. Our brain memorizes best when we do these two things. We have to do a spaced repetition, meaning doing the same thing more than once, leaving some time in between sessions, and then active recall. That means trying to remember what you studied. Those two things really help move the content from our working memory to our long-term memory, from the RAM memory to the hard drive, in a way. So for memorizing vocabulary, we just have to do a lot of this. For memorizing grammar rules, to a lot of people, grammar is scary. It's really not that difficult when you start working on it. It's just that in our first language, we don't think about grammar rules. But if we are learning a second language as an adult, learning those grammar rules will really speed up the process. Like, to give you an example, English is obviously my second language, right? I have a thick accent, but I can more or less think in English, I can speak fast, I can write well, etc. So let's say that someone is learning English as a second language. In English, we have this weird thing. For building a negative, for example, I walk, the negative version in a lot of languages would be something like I not walk, like the same thing with a negative particle, right? Like not walk. In English, it's different. We need to add an auxiliary verb, do, and we have to say I do not walk. If we are using it in the third person, he walks, the negative version would be he does not walk. The auxiliary verb is the one that gets conjugated. In the past, I walked, I did not walk. Again, if English is your first language, you are going to do this automatically. You don't have to think about it. But I do. I have to think about it. Like, at this point, it's kind of automatic, sort of. But when I was learning, if someone explained to me, oh, this is how you do it. You use an auxiliary verb to do, and you conjugate it. And this is what that means. And this is how you conjugate it in the third person. This is how you conjugate it in the past. That really speeds up the process. Would I get that by pattern recognition, consuming a lot of content? Maybe, eventually, I would probably do. But if someone explains that to me, I'm going to save so much time. So the same thing when you're learning Spanish. If you learn how to conjugate verbs and how the different tenses work, you learn so much faster. And then when you're watching content or using an app, you start recognizing those patterns. But you'll be working with something that your brain already understands. So when you are learning grammar concepts, my recommendation is that in addition to doing like spaced repetition and active recall, that you try to learn it in a way where you would be able to explain it to someone else, where you could be able to tell your friend, hey Peter, I'm going to tell you, whether you want it or not, how the object pronouns work in Spanish. The problem here is that in the third person, we have a different pronoun in Spanish for a direct object and for an indirect object. Oh, and what is an indirect object? I'm glad you asked. This is what that is, right? At the end, in Spanish, it's not that many things that you have to learn. You have to learn like some basic tenses, like your present tense, the two past tenses, pretérito perfecto simple and pretérito imperfecto, your future tense, which is usually built with ir, a, right? Yo voy a hacer, whatever. Your compound tenses, like I've never done this, or I had already done this. The object pronouns, which are kind of tricky because of that thing of the direct object and the indirect object. Conditional constructions, the subjunctive, and that's pretty much it. So, if you learn all those things one by one over a long period of time, it will feel hard, but it's perfectly doable. I've seen so many people do it. And by the way, let's talk about doing this over a long period of time. So it's very important to, whatever you do, make it sustainable, right? In a way, this is also like going to the gym. Like working out and getting in shape is hard. The most important thing is to make it sustainable. For example, I went to a couple CrossFit classes a while ago. They were very, very intense. CrossFit is not for me. I understand that it will get you in shape, like really, really in shape. But to me, CrossFit is not sustainable. I cannot do that over 2 years. Some other workout programs work for me, and I can sustain them. I can work out 2-3 times a week and stay in shape. So even though we should go beyond using apps and watching Netflix, which are both great, or watching comprehensible input videos on YouTube, which is also great, and we should make it feel hard, we should also make it sustainable so that we can actively learn over a long period of time, 2-3 years, and then a lifetime. When we learn a second language as an adult, most of us will never get to a native-like proficiency. We can get really good at it, but it will never be perfect. And people will always be able to tell that it's our second language, like in my case, right? So I would recommend getting obsessed over learning Spanish. In addition to the apps and the content, the things that are more fun, adding a lot more of the things that are not that fun, like studying grammar and doing active memorization for vocabulary in a way that is sustainable and that you can do over a long period of time. Some research recommends like 70% structured learning, like studying grammar and vocabulary, 30% content and contextual practice. I don't really care about the ratios. As long as you do both, you'll see an improvement. The thing here is that even though I'm kind of putting like the apps and the watching content as the fun part, and the grammar and vocabulary as the not so much fun, as the hard part, in a way, learning grammar and studying vocabulary will reduce frustration, which is key for keeping your learning active over a long period of time. Basically, if you go watch a Netflix show and you haven't studied any grammar and you don't know any vocabulary, you're going to feel lost and it's going to be overwhelming. With Duolingo, you don't have that problem that much because it kind of builds up from the very beginning. But anyway, if you first study grammar and you study vocabulary, and then you do the contextual practice, like with content or with practicing speaking, etc., your frustration levels will be kept at a minimum, which is key, again, to sustain this over a long period of time. And just one last thing about accents, right? Again, I have a thick accent when I'm speaking in English. This varies a lot. I've seen many students learn. Some were really good with the grammar. Some had a really good accent from the very beginning. Some didn't. I wouldn't worry that much about it. Just try to make yourself understood and try to improve your accent. Eventually, you'll pick up more phonetic little things about your target language, Spanish in this case. But if you have a thick accent and your friend doesn't, don't worry too much about it. It varies a lot from person to person. So, summarizing, we have to understand that learning a second language as an adult is difficult. We should be combining content and apps with active studying of grammar and vocabulary. We should make our studying habits sustainable over the long term. This is key. This is very, very important. And we shouldn't worry too much about our accent in our second language. We'll just try to improve it over time. So that's all I have. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.